I'm in the hands of our MC in terms of how much time we have for taking questions, but I think we can probably take a round of questions.
Thank you, Chair. My name is David Adolwa. I'm the Regional Transit Advisor for USAID Compete in Eastern Central Africa. Our work geographically meets that of South African Trade Hub at the border of Tanzania and Malawi, at Kasumulu and at Tunduma. My contribution is, first thing, let me say thank you very much for the organizers for planning this workshop in this manner. It's very fitting that one-stop border post comes in at the end, and the experiences that have been shared are very interesting. I would like to share with you an East African experience very briefly, and which you can compare with what is happening in Chirundu. And I pick one of my borders, which is called Malaba. It handles about 1,000 trucks a day. A one-stop border post hasn't been built at this border, but transit times about 5 years ago were up to 5 days. Transit times recently, during a choke analysis study by the World Bank, have dropped to 1 day. This border still has a single-lane bridge. Why do I say this? There is this huge elephant, and my colleague from SATFC really alluded to it, the issue of what are these hidden things that breed inefficiencies at the border. It is very clear that infrastructure is not the only thing, but there is a huge percentage of problems that exist because of how we actually manage these borders. Quickly, we have done a root cause analysis to find out exactly what is it that is ailing our borders in East Africa, and maybe it's similar to yours in the South African region. The first one is there is major failure of private sector to participate in influencing the day-to-day operations of borders in a systematic manner. And we have found that private sector and public sector are engaged in deep, silent conflict. They have very unsavory terms that they use to each other. Private sector considers the public sector corrupt and greedy. Public sector considers private sector as smugglers and criminals. And these deep-seated positions held in industry are really what are some of the causes that are causing neglect of our borders. The second one, and my last one, is really there's a disconnect between what you call the headquarters and the border. This has led to neglect of the facilities and infrastructure and the environment at the border. You will find that headquarters people never visit border stations. Decisions are made at the regional level and national levels without actually taking the peculiar circumstances that exist at these borders. So we have found that the need to bring the headquarters closer to borders in order for the headquarters to be aware and to begin to take responsibility of borders is a very important issue that needs to be addressed. So really that is my comment. The big elephant is it just infrastructure, or is there a bigger monster we need to deal with in terms of how we are managing, how we are staffing, how we are operating at this border post? Thank you.
Thank you very much. My name is Kotla Ramapani. I'm from the Privatization Agency in Botswana. I'd like to say I've been listening for the past 2 days at the presentations that were made and the initiatives around facilitating trade across borders. One thing that comes to my mind is that it is very important to have this partnership between the public sector and the private sector on all initiatives around improvement of trade facilitations at border posts. First, because the private sector, in some respect, serves as the service providers for those services that are required by public sector to improve their services at the borders. Secondly, the private sector is the client for the services that have been offered by different agencies of government at border posts. Thirdly, the private sector can serve as funders or provide funds for the infrastructure that is required for the improvement of the services at the border posts through PPPs, as we heard yesterday. And I believe that it is very important for us, as we continue to discuss, not to assume that it is only government agencies that know the problems and that have the solutions. And while we have continued to talk about the involvement of the private sector, that does not seem to come out very clearly in the presentations that have been made in the form of exactly how the private sector is contributing and how their views, what their views are. But I feel that, yes, the initiatives are in the right direction, but we need to act more together and also stop being afraid of allowing the private sector to provide funding where they can through the PPP model. Thank you very much.
Thank you for the questions and comments. I think I'll give our presenters a chance to maybe respond to any of the specific issues that were raised. I think maybe highlighting that the issue of knowledge management was raised in both the presentations, and I think this is quite important, particularly in the context of the issue of the headquarters or decisions being taken at a regional or national level but not being translated into action at the border posts. This is quite an important issue, and I think it speaks to the importance of all our initiatives being supported by strong capacity building programs. I saw in the presentation by Mr. Nkoma in Chirundu that there was a strong component of capacity building as well, where joint training of the officials from both Zimbabwe and Zambia was undertaken in order to ensure that the benefits are realized.
Role of private sector, there should be a partnership. And I've always said that we cannot be at those borders if there was no private sector. We are there because of private sector. And whatever we are doing, the private sector must be the beneficiary. We are not going to do anything against private sector. We are supposed to do it for them. So basically, my approach to this is that we are partners. And we are there to do what private sector wants, to facilitate trade. That's why we are there. So basically, I'm aware of some initiative under SADC where there are these issues of, at national level, we have all sorts of committees that are being constituted to ensure that there is this exchange of information. But I think the critical thing is getting this information also on the borders and get also our operatives to share what we are sharing in headquarters. It should be the responsibility of both private sector as well as public sector to disseminate this information to our operatives, so that even if public sector we haven't communicated, we the private sector should communicate to our operatives to say, no, these are the decisions that have been made, so that our officers are compelled to get to those of us who are in headquarters and say, oh, look, the private sector is saying there are these issues. Yeah? It's a two-way thing. I see it as a two-way thing. It should not be left to public sector, but private sector also should start pushing the private sector to get what it wants from the public sector, because public sector is there to serve their interest. I think that's my comment on this one.
If I can just say briefly that I wanted to thank the intervention on what's happening in East Africa. The lessons learned are very important, and for me, the one-stop border, even if we say Chirundu is a success, which it is, it will always evolve. The concept will continuously change and get better. It's interesting if you look at ECOWAS, for example. I don't know if there's anybody from there here, if they could share, but how they are approaching it, even in terms of the ownership of the facilities. We are doing as the bank, the Senegal, Gambia. In ECOWAS, the facilities themselves belong to the ECOWAS Secretariat. I have heard them say even the staff of the borders, the long-term idea, I've heard this, I don't know if this is what they are looking to apply now, they want them to be like the secretariat staff, community staff, so that when you go to work, you're not going as the Zimbabwean, you are wearing the ECOWAS uniform. Is one set of staff, one set of facilities. Because I think the long-term vision, there should be no border anyway. We should be able to walk across to do our business. Thank you.
All right. One more question from the lady.
Thank you. My name is Valerie Sazia. I'm from the Zambian Customs and Freight Forwarding Association. We've heard from the floor the private sector taking ownership of borders, and before customs get blamed, I can assure you we get blasted. Having said that and having taken ownership, the Zambian industry in freight forwarding and customs had a look at how the borders were actually working and where we were to actually blame for delays. And a lot of it came through with lack of training. And we've heard about training today and capacity building. I'm very pleased to say and very proud to say that with the cooperation of our Zambian authorities, we run training courses which customs come and evaluate and also participate actively in helping in that training. So between both of us, it's nice to say something between private sector and the customs administration that's actually working to better how trade facilitation works. Thank you.
Thank you. Mine is just a comment. Of course, Chirundu is a success, and I think we must proudly take that compliment that Chirundu has been a success. But what I wish to mention is there are also learning issues which come out of Chirundu, especially with those who will be establishing one-stop border post in future. I think when you look at Chirundu, although it is a success story, but we'll also find some issues where we can say we could have done it better this way. And as a result of that, I'm sure at Chirundu they are getting quite a number of visits from other administrations in the region who are coming to see how they did it and how they should not do it, or how we can avoid the mistakes which took place at Chirundu. So it will provide good lessons both on the good and on the bad in the region. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Unfortunately, we've run out of time, so we won't be able to take any more questions. But just to conclude by thanking our presenters once again for the excellent presentations. And I'm sure, Mr. Nkoma and Mr. Manduna, you'll have a lot of people in this room knocking on your door for your expertise and your knowledge in this area as we continue to pursue the establishment of one-stop borders in the region. Thank you.